It's summertime, so you know what that means? New Stranger Things season, and time for everyone to try and secure their Stranger Things Halloween costumes early. Yes, you too can dress like a normal child. This show has had such an impact on media, more than any other show has in the past decade, and I'm at a point where I can't even use my phone without seeing a single Stranger Things reference or thing. I figured this would be my opportunity to cash in and not just talk about the new season, but the entire series. With me watching the latest season part 1, I figured that this show would end with a part 2, but no, that's not gonna fucking happen. And since it's gonna be another couple years till we get another season, I figured I'd talk about maybe my most controversial opinion yet. That this show should have ended after season 1. Now, I'm not trying to say that I think the show is bad or gets to dog shit quality or even becomes unbearable to watch as you progress. You can like something and still point out its flaws, and I like this show, goddammit, which is why it's so hard for me to pick on it. And there's some people that just don't like this show because it's popular, which that's not even really a reason to hate a show in my opinion. It's okay to like easy to swallow media, and there's no shame in enjoying things made for everyone. There isn't that many shows with a cultural impact like this one, so it's gonna be a little bit more harder to critique. I'm gonna do this video a little strange. No pun intended. Season 4 isn't over yet, so this video will go over seasons 1, 2, and 3. I have never given anyone my opinions on any of those seasons or any of those episodes, so I figured I should start there. The next video, which will be part 2, will cover the final season and my thoughts as a series overall, because it's probably going to change. Hell, I'll even give the seasons ratings since I'm already here, and probably rank them from worst to best. But just know that this is far from a bad show overall. Everyone likes this show for a reason. There isn't really a bad season with this show either. There are episodes that we'd like to forget because they're pretty strange on their own, but the show seems to keep up good standards for the whole runtime. With all that out of the way, let's start with the first season of Stranger Things. Season 1 of Stranger Things is pretty good. It's probably the perfect season out of all of them. Every element about what's good about this show is all present and almost exclusive to season 1. The first season of Stranger Things is a wonderful anomaly. I don't even think it should work the way it does. It doesn't have a single original concept in it, yet it feels like something we've never seen before. Everyone immediately fell in love with the show in its first season, and there's a damn good reason why. This show gets into some pretty wild shit later on. There's Lovecraftian monsters, parallel shadow dimensions, and of course Dungeons and Dragons, which is a pretty tough pill to swallow for the average Joe on their first viewing. Honestly, there isn't anything wrong with season 1. Great pacing, you're hooked for 99% of the runtime, the characters are the best part of season 1 and of the show overall, and the acting is great, which is crazy because most of the actors at this time were children. Stranger Things in general is typically a good example of a plot keeping consistency and engagement from start to finish, and that is very apparent in season 1. Darker elements of the show never spring up on you out of nowhere, and the lighthearted stuff, while being cutesy and feel good, is also genuine and realistic. Finally, the characters are still the best thing about the show. If you go back to season 1, every character is based on some 80s stereotype. With Steve being in high school, you figured he was just gonna be this douchebag bully who picks on the relatable, lovable character, Jonathan. He ends up being one of the coolest dudes in the show. He's arguably the most popular character in the cast. When you meet Hopper, you think he's just gonna be some tough cop who ignores delusional claims and upset mothers. Even the first trailers made you think that, but they evolve his character into making him actually care, and he sort of wants to help find Will before it's too late, kind of to make up for past trauma that he felt was his fault and that he didn't do enough to prevent. On top of all that, this show has wonderful music, genuine sad moments, and well-written sharp humor. The first season just keeps you guessing too. In the middle of the season, you're shown that Will's probably dead, and it conflicts all of our main characters. It sends all of our characters into a frenzy, and it throws us off guard because everything we've been shown thus far shows otherwise, that he's still alive somewhere out there. It shakes up the story and makes us second guess ourselves, which none of the seasons really do later on. Now, I just rambled on about how much I think that Stranger Things Season 1 is perfect, so I think I should stop here and talk about why I think you should stop watching, or why people probably stopped watching after Season 1. Talking about a show as popular as Stranger Things, I kind of have to be careful with what I say here. I know plenty of people in my daily life that watched the first season and never really got to watching later seasons. While I do enjoy the show, I always figured I'm just doing it out of habit at this point, and it's the same case for me and Love, Death, Robots. So basically, I'll have something to talk about with my friends. All of the stuff that made me fall in love with the show is in Season 1. If you compare all the stuff that was in Season 1 to all the stuff that's in the show now, it's all practically gone. I would argue that Stephen King novels had a very huge impact on this show. From the title card font to the episodes being called chapters, the show is even framed like a Stephen King novel. He has nothing to do with the show, yet the series has the tone of a story like Stand By Me or It, with young relatable kids dealing with some shit beyond their own understanding. Unfortunately, the one key component of a story like this is the sense of mystery, which is completely gone by the end of Season 1. I truly believe that this is what the show suffers from the most. People just wanted the show to keep going on, and I didn't know why. The mystery was solved by the end of Season 1. Yeah, Season 1 ended with a little teaser of Will spitting up some alien, but that's not a reason to continue the show. It's always cool when these mysteries leave one loose thread. It's better that a story like this would keep you guessing. Ending a show with a mystery is perfect because it's a damn horror mystery show. Yeah, in Season 1 you go in not knowing shit, and you learn as you view. But once you've learned the mystery, you want the characters to find out, but in that meantime you also want to keep the audience entertained with jokes, character work, and even horror scenes. Remember when the show was actually scary? Getting chased by CGI monsters that look like silly putty just isn't that scary. I do appreciate that sometimes they try to use practical effects. It's way easier doing CGI. But it just doesn't look that scary, especially when these monsters are things we've seen hundreds of times. A show like this really thrives off the fear of the unknown. Anyways, besides that, I still think that Season 1's pretty perfect. We're gonna go ahead and just give that one like a 9 out of 10. I'm pretty cool with that. I'm gonna go ahead and start by saying that I think that this is my least favorite season, but I weirdly don't have much to say about it. Season 2 just sort of exists to try to pull in more people, and it does that pretty well, but it really doesn't up the ante on any of the factors that made this show so good. Once again, seeing a Demogorgon again is nothing. We've already seen these monsters, and they almost have no effect. There's no new enhancement or anything, so it's just not engaging. And that's weirdly the case for a lot of the monsters and shit that you see in these scenes. Yeah, the Mind Flayer's kinda scary, but he really doesn't do shit besides shoot dark powder. And he controls the Demogorgons, but once again, they're not really scary because we've seen them before. Also, it's weird because the other issue they face is like the government and lab workers and whatnot, and they're barely a threat. They're barely even fucking noticeable in this season. They really don't stop our characters from doing anything that they want. No one I know could name any of the characters that worked in the lab except for Papa. I think Papa's the only name, and that's not even his real fucking name. They also added more characters and side characters, which is fine. I like Bob, Billy, and Murray, but they just kind of felt like they were supposed to play smaller roles. And if they do too much or get too close to the main cast, they fucking get dumped. By the way, this is a formula that they tend to keep and reuse in other seasons, but we'll get into that later. Mike surprisingly didn't do anything this season. I mean, he reunited with Elle, and that was like pretty much all the character work he got for the entire season. Mike used to be one of the main characters, but as these seasons progress, he just feels like he doesn't have much to do than survive and maybe help out with the plan that somebody else comes up with. Lots of the main characters from season 1 turn into side characters, and the more you get into the show, the more crowded it feels. This is when we start introducing new characters, and like I said, old characters just don't do much. And obviously the show has the option of killing off some of the older characters and thin out the main cast, but they really don't want to. It's really strange with this show because it feels like a character hierarchy. Characters people like get the most screen time, And then this is when Steve and Dustin kind of take over Stranger Things. It's all in season 2 because people like them so much. People really like them in season 2, so now Stranger Things, the A-plot is almost always the Steve and Dustin show. And sure, maybe I'm being too harsh, but I genuinely think that they just push the characters everyone likes the most. And no, I'm not saying that the dynamic the two have is bad. The beginning of their friendship is the best part about their scenes, and in season 2 alone, it's perfect. It might sound like I'm being picky about what characters are getting spotlight and which aren't, but season 1, everyone felt important and that they had a stake in the plot. Season 2 is honestly where this show started to lose some of its focus, and some of the characters who get less screen time have no reason to be a part of the plot, but they are because they're an iconic character at this point, and you gotta include them somehow. I know that some people will talk about the issues being fixed as far as old characters being pushed off to the side and shit, but I just don't see enough of it being done, just because this season starts making it happen more. In season 1, Jonathan was the relatable character that everyone liked, and he really was just trying to get with Nancy, and he still kind of does that in season 2 because he didn't succeed in the previous season. But when he's not with Nancy, he feels like he has less and less to do in the story. It feels like we only like Jonathan when he's tied in with Nancy, but in this season alone and the one that follows it, they just really don't care about Jonathan, which feels weird.
We'd like a room.
We got those. You want a single or a double?
Double.
Yeah, even after all these years, that joke made me laugh. You don't really have to bank all the comedy off the Steve and Dustin dynamic or include them in any joke for it to be funny, so. Over time, we just forget about the rest of it because the stuff barely even affects the overall story. You can just tell your friend what they missed and they just have to say, oh, okay. They never question you and you just kind of forget about it. And that's the last thing you want to do with this show, is make it forgettable. My main thing here is that season 2 now is just maybe the worst season out of all of them. At the time, season 2 was pretty good, and yeah, we got focus on characters that were either new or that we'd never seen before, but in retrospect, the characters that got sidelined hadn't really been put back into the show until maybe recently or never. So it just feels weird since character work is like the best thing about this show, and it just sucks seeing these likable characters being sidelined and just forgotten about. Anyways, yeah, this one isn't bad, but I'm probably gonna give it like a 6 or 7 out of 10. We'll just do a 6, and then if I feel generous later, I'll bring it up. Alright, season 3 is a great season, right? They got the new Starcorp Mall, and everyone really likes it, and this is where a lot of memes were born about the show. I'm gonna try to say this in the nicest way I can, but I felt like this season sort of felt a little bit more anticlimactic. Now I know I'm playing into the theme of that every season just, gets worse and the show should have ended at season 1. But the whole point is that you can't really end a show like this when it's this damn popular. People are gonna watch it no matter how many seasons you make of it, and it's gonna make less sense along the way, sure, but that's not gonna stop people from watching it and liking it. But I will say, yes, there is a lot of stuff that happens in this season. They tried this whole body snatcher storyline, but they don't do anything interesting with the concept. I wanted the possessed characters to be a little bit more trickier and smarter than the main cast, but they just made the main cast like the A-team and way too smart. And the initial runtime, they figure it out before the end of episode 3 anyways. For some odd reason, the rest of the season is just the main characters finding out what we already know. And what is there for the audience to learn or do if we already know the answers to the mystery and the real threats? Well, not much, honestly. Like I said, they maybe could have done something more with the body snatcher concept if they weren't busy juggling 4 to 5 storylines at once. Season 1 is tightly focused because all the characters are working towards one goal, but in Season 3 we have 4 or 5 storylines all happening at once, which makes it just feel unfocused. They eventually get to the same goal, but it doesn't really feel satisfying. You have Russians fucking with the gate, and Billy gets possessed. The rest of the season is our characters finding out what we already know. It also got on my nerves that everyone sort of became invincible now. They are still very much kids, but they sneak in and out of Russian bases like it's nothing. And yeah, that kind of takes me out of the action. Yeah, one of them has superpowers, but the rest of them are just normal kids. It just lowers the stakes. And no, I'm not saying they need to die for there to be high stakes, but they just needed there to be something different than a lab and or a monster trying to eat the kids, the same thing that they've been doing every single season. I just think that if the show didn't drag as much as it did, the cracks in the plot would be less visible. Any other show doing this would have been called out by now, but once again, the characters are the saving grace of the entire show. Even then, it's still too much of a good thing. You might hear a character give a weak line delivery. You might begin to wonder, is Winona Ryder a good actress, or is she really good at just playing a mother in distress? I mean, hell, her character pretty much stays static for the whole entire series runtime. She's just been the same stressed out woman for 3 seasons. These problems are even apparent in the other seasons. You might even make fun of the show because of it, like in season 2 when Natalia Dyer had to act drunk, but she clearly at that point had never been drunk in her life. Also, I don't know what the fuck's going on back there. Extras are really funny. Also in season 3, the whole 80s nostalgia thing is pretty beaten to death here. The Coke scene is just one of the strangest and most misplaced scenes in the whole season. Yeah, that one really bothered me. This season also has a case of too many characters. They tried introducing a character like Lexi, but he kind of gave off Bob vibes throughout the whole season, and guess what? He got domed before the season ended. Then, when you meet characters like Eddie in season 4, you just kind of assume that he's gonna get domed too. And the kills, of course, are only done out of shock value. With the series reusing this season after season, it just isn't shocking anymore. And I'm not trying to bet that Eddie dies before the next part comes out, but I just wouldn't be surprised if it did. And like I said, these characters only get to be in the show if audiences like him a lot. Not a lot of people liked the racist asshole Billy, so he has to go too. And this is especially disappointing in the case of Max. They had a whole arc in season 2, and they really have nothing to do with each other for the entire season, so when Billy sacrifices himself at the end of season 3, there's definitely an absence of emotional weight. Let's also talk more about characters here. Steve gets a lot of character work in this one once again, but they give him someone like Robin to bounce off of. His arc consists of him still trying to be the cool guy after high school is over. He hangs out with the kids because they're the only ones that still think he's cool. He still has a high school mentality at this point, and he kicks off the season with him trying to get a girl. As an audience, we know it's dumb, but the show still goes to subtly show us that he might be rewarded with the right girl for him by the end of the season. That's what we expect in a story like this, and that's what Steve thinks he needs to solve all of his problems. Instead of the story playing out that way like we expect, it gives us something new that's even better for his character. If you ask me, this is the perfect way to subvert audience expectations, not to outsmart the audience. Ultimately, this is why we love watching Robin and Steve interact. Once again, there are characters that don't get any love at all. Will Byers has the power to sense monsters, but he's barely used here. They just don't like the Byers family anymore in this show. It's really strange. The only one that matters is Joyce, and her sons just have to kind of take a sideline every single season now, and you don't really know why. Will is pretty important in the first season and in the second season, and he's one of the best child actors in the entire show, but you just can't see him that much in the later episodes. He just very much stands around and does what he's told. One of my biggest issues with him was just seeing Will in the background looking worried. I felt like he had the potential to be the emotional core for the entire group. The scene of him in season 3 losing his shit is easily one of the most impactful scenes of season 3, but it's immediately after this that they just decide to forget it and fight monsters, like it never even happened. It feels so out of place now, and it's a big waste now having had seen shit like this that they could have done well with the show. Yeah, but since we didn't get anything like that, I just sat there waiting for the Steven, Dustin, and Robin bits.
Step back.
No.
Seriously.
No! If you die, I die.
Okay.
Don't get me wrong, I do like watching these scenes, but I noticed that they started using fan favorite dynamics to get the audience to care about other characters instead of building new relationships from scratch. We like Robin because she works well with Steve and Dustin, but some people have made the argument that they don't really like Erica, so she kinda gets sidelined a little bit after this season. By the way, the only issues with Erica is the writing for her character. She's supposed to come off as the slightly annoying character, but Is that really a dynamic you can play with the Steve, Dustin, and Robin dynamic, or does it just kind of clash? And like I said, the writers would much rather spend time working on characters that people actually still like than taking their chances with a character that might be a hit or miss. Yeah, the D&D scene with her and Eddie in season 4 is pretty good, and that's a good example of showing her character working well in a different dynamic, but they don't really do anything else with the rest of it. She kind of just gets sidelined again. And with the topic of the characters being the driving force for the whole show, I now have to talk about the biggest problem and biggest disappointment with season 3. Hopper. I genuinely believe that his character was fucked up this season. He pretty much had two modes in this season: complete jackass or action hero. It's fine having a character act like a dickhead for a significant part of the runtime if they learn or grow from it. He begs Joyce to go on a date with him for a good chunk of the season until he eventually wears her down. She just eventually gave in, and there wasn't really a chance for us to feel happy for Hopper because he didn't really change at all. Then even after that he gets a fake out death, so he definitely didn't learn his lesson at all. You can argue that his letter to Elle completes his arc and he did learn something, but with the fact that we know that he doesn't die and he's just out in Russia, and they tease that at the end of season 3, it makes the scene just lose all of its initial impact. And you know, Joyce isn't even any better because she's just been the distraught, stressed out mother for 3 seasons now. It would just help if they just spread this shit out a little bit. It would just really help if the writers tried to balance some of this shit out, but I still very much enjoyed this season. We love these characters, we love seeing them interact, and we get some of the best scenes out of it too. I like scenes of the girls shopping, or Will trying to hold together his friends with his D&D game, and even the never-ending story scene. I like that too. The show is still very good and the season's still very good. It's just that there are characters that we like so much that the writers are willing to go full throttle into the fact that we like these characters so much. Some of the characters don't get as much care as far as writing. And as far as the mystery aspect goes, again, I just got bored with it way too early. I knew everything that was going on, so I just didn't care. The government plot lines are just not that interesting. Russians are way too normal for a show called Stranger Things. The creative juices were just running a little bit lower here, and we didn't really notice. And that's really the big problem here. The show just feels more stretched out than it should be. If it wasn't for the fact that they showed us that this show could be so good and so airtight and so well written and so emotional and so fun to watch in season 1, this shit would be not as disappointing. Which doesn't make me hate the seasons or the shows, it just makes me a little bit sad because it's something that we could have had but just didn't get. Anyways, I still like this season a lot, all things considered, so I'm just going to give this one a 7 out of 10. Honestly, the more you think about the little stuff, the more it bothers you, which is pretty much what happened to me, but I know that a lot of people don't think about this little stuff, which is why they enjoy the show so much. Most of this video was me pointing out the flaws with the show, but the more you kind of think of this little stuff, the more you see cracks, and the more cracks you see, the more you begin that this show wasn't supposed to go on this long, or at least this version. Once again, I was always a strong believer that this show would be better as an anthology series. Just keep the tone, but add a new cast of characters, new setting, new types of monsters, new mysteries to be solved, new threats to be scared of, and new relationships that grow on us every single season. How cool would that be? That sounds awesome, right? Honestly, if you can craft a complete and unique story in 8 to 10 episodes, then that's the most impressive thing you could do, rather than dragging out an overall story for years on end. And yeah, sure, the main issue with the show is that we became way too attached to these characters, and the favorites just got all the spotlight. The original story couldn't be topped, but the creator of their shows only kept the characters because you can't really sell merchandise and have mall outlets and Stranger Things themed shit if you get rid of these characters in later seasons. And it really isn't easy for me to talk about this show like this, but I do it because I really love this show, and this is just shit I think about while I'm watching that I think could make it better. I literally do this with all the MCU movies and every movie franchise I follow. For a lot of y'all, this show is exactly what you want, and that's fine. I'm not saying that these issues make the show bad. I don't want people to watch this video and think that I want people to stop watching the show. It is just my opinion after all, and I just wanted to share them to see if anyone else also had these thoughts. At the time of writing this, of course, I've only seen the first part of season 4, and I could be wrong about all this. I would like to remember this show as being dynamic and thrilling, and that it's a show that really keeps me hooked from beginning to end, rather than remembering the show as a show that didn't know when it was time to let go.